Happy December 16th, everyone. Welcome to the last Ledge Rep Network meeting of the calendar year. We are coming up closely on holiday break for school districts and well, pretty much immediately after that, the legislative session. So thanks for bearing with me and being sick last week and for taking time to join today. I know our participation will be a little bit less in the actual live Zoom today, just sort of given my last minute need to reschedule. So we should have quite a few more folks watching the recording over the next week or so. You know who Cynthia and I are. I won't go through and introduce ourselves, but Cynthia and I are here to support you. Cynthia is out this week, so it's just me with you today. And what we've got ready for you all today is just a couple of updates on committee days, which is basically like the first day of school, pre-legislative session gathering that happened about a week and a half ago. I want to talk about legislative conference. I'm going to give you some more sort of session contextual updates. And then we will just sort of move into some discussion and get ready for session in all the ways. Wanted to share with you that during the first week of December, many of you know the legislature was together. They do this every year. They come together for something called committee days. And during this time, essentially, everyone's on campus in Olympia. It feels like the legislative session, but it's not yet. And many advocates have in-person meetings with lawmakers. And then the primary sort of purpose that people are together is to conduct committee work sessions. So every committee of the legislature met in some way, shape, or form to talk about things that were education related and not. I pulled out just a couple of highlights as to how Cynthia and I spent our time. The two education committees met and had some interesting work sessions around career and technical education, CTE, in the House, and then ALE, alternative learning, combined with some artificial intelligence work in the Senate Education Committee hearing. The House Finance Committee was together to talk about a myriad of things, but one related to a lot of the conversations we've been having, and that is the impacts on school districts from last year's Senate Bill 5814. That's the temporary staffing sales tax impact. Superintendent Ron Banner, I'll get into this later, but Superintendent Ron Banner from Clover Park was sort of the K-12 voice in that work session and was happy to hear some of his comments. I think he did a really great job at talking about sort of the impacts connected from school districts to legislators, and he's just speaking really for one district. So thought that was good. The House Capital Budget Committee came together to talk about a school construction assistance program, SCAP, and some ideas that they have for sort of revisioning the funding formula there in the future, not a 2026 legislative session issue. And then the budget committees came together to talk about the budget. We also met with a number of legislators during those couple of days, just to have some sort of pre-session meetings to talk about the WSSDA platform. So just wanted to give you all a heads up on that before we dive in. Also wanted to take a minute to remind you about our legislative conference that we're doing jointly with WASA and WASBO. That conference is coming up in just about 3-ish weeks. Friday, January 9th and Saturday, January 10th. That's the weekend immediately prior to the legislative session. During that time, we will spend quite a bit of time talking about some hot topics to which we're sort of working on right now. We will also have some legislative guests present. Lieutenant Governor Denny Heck will join us, along with Representative Mia Gregerson from the 33rd. She is the vice chair of House Appropriations, kind of the education budget lead in the House. And then also Representative Skylar Rude from the Walla Walla area. The two of them will join us together during that time. The other thing that I'm really excited about is we're going to be pulling together representatives from each of the three education funding sort of work groups that have met over the last interim and beyond. That's the OSPI work group that WASDA was a part of, the University of Washington SUPS group that's been talking about end funding, and then also Representative Santos's Big Idea work group. We're going to be pulling together members from all three of those and sort of having a panel discussion on the main stage during the legislative conference. And then we'll also have a student panel during the final general session. So just wanted to share some updates with you around that and hope to see many of you there with us on the 9th and 10th of January. Okay. Any questions about any of those updates before we dive in and talk a little bit about session? Okay. So you've seen this slide a number of times, and the number of days just keeps getting shorter. When I went in this morning to change it from however many days it was last week to this week, I was like, oh yeah, okay, we're in the 20s. Just 27 days left until the start of the legislative session. We have been hearing a lot more updates, given what we sort of just experienced with committee days. None of this information is necessarily new to you, but just felt it was important to put back in front of us in terms of the context that we'll be walking into. We know that we are walking into a significant budget shortfall this upcoming session. They're currently projecting $4.3 billion deficit over the next 4 years. We are generally seeing growing cost pressures, thinking about a lot of the maintenance level costs that our budget has to sort of maintain, thinking about caseloads, inflation, et cetera, and how those numbers are continuing to rise. We also are seeing just a continued structural sort of imbalance, thinking about how our past legislative budgets have relied on either one-time funding or some optimistic revenue options. And so we're continuing to see costs exceed revenue. And then our sort of message that we're continuing to push is that K-12 stability just has to remain and continue amidst this challenging budget time. Really just saying that if you have any sort of ideas or solutions that are coming forward without funding, those are no good, and we need to not create any more uncertainties for school districts K-12. A couple of other updates we've heard over the last couple of weeks. Governor Ferguson announced his proposed operating budget would be cuts only, meaning that the governor is not necessarily going to include any new revenue proposals within his budget. We also know that while the legislature is in session, there will be another revenue forecast and caseload forecast that will come out in February. Those will be sort of the final numbers that the legislature will use to adopt their 2026 supplemental budget that they'll be working on this session. Every sector, not just education, of course, but every sector will be sort of in a self-preservation mode. For example, just don't cut. Every sector is showing up that way. That was really clearly heard from just talking with colleagues and advocates from other sectors during committee days. We also know just going into the next year that all of the House and half of the Senate will be up for reelection next year. That's some good context just to know as it relates to how legislators will show up this session. And then also just an interesting fact that I heard from one of my colleagues that I think was just interesting to point out given the context around revenue is that no new member of the legislature has lost a race over a tax vote since 2020. We have heard, we don't know exactly what, but we have heard that Democrats in the House and Senate are sort of weighing what their revenue proposals might be for 2026. We know that the governor's budget will sort of come in revenue neutral. It'll be cuts only. We are anticipating that budget should be released early next week. It is possible that the Gov's budget will come out on Friday, but what we're hearing more likely is next week, Monday or Tuesday. So as soon as that comes out, we'll definitely sort of put together an education summary and figure out how we're going to distribute that out to you. So that's some of the context that we're hearing. I'm sure there's a lot more out there. Conversations will continue over the coming weeks in talking with legislators during committee days. And also I've had a couple of Zoom meetings with legislators in the last few days, folks are definitely ready to enjoy holidays with their families, and with the budget coming, the work is really starting to ramp up for our lawmakers and their staff getting ready for this session. Also, just wanted to sort of flash this visual again on your screen, just to remind you that WSSDA did release our legislative priorities a couple of months ago. You have seen them a number of times, so we won't necessarily revisit all of them today. But I do have a couple of areas that we sort of gotten some clarity on and heard some updates on, so we're going to dive into there. The first being around enrollment decline. One of actually the very first listed item on WSDA's platform is essentially saying that we would like to see the legislature reinvest any dollars that could be lost as it relates to enrollment decline equitably back into the K through 12 system. So what we are hearing right now from OFM is the acronym on your screen. It's the Office of Financial Management. It's essentially the state agency that helps the governor and the state sort of handle the budget. We are seeing and hearing, given the sort of caseload forecast, et cetera, that general enrollment is lower than what was assumed in the budget. I think that is not a surprise. We've talked about that for a couple of months. Right now, that's looking to be around 8,000 fewer students in K through 12. So that would essentially mean there's an opportunity for quote unquote savings of about $80 million per year. However, in the midst of that, sort of let's put that over here and then a pocket on the other side, we have seen some increases in some other areas of sort of caseload forecast, including special education enrollment, special education safety net costs, and then also higher poverty percentages with drive-out lap funding. Those sort of increases alone will essentially cost another about $180 million. And then also, we're seeing increase that relate to IPD. That's sort of an inflationary factor, more costs coming in from SEB and running START. And so as sort of the budget is looking at enrollment, will there be a decline? Will there not? Where does that funding go? We're generally hearing our OFM say that it's sort of a wash right now, and that while general enrollment is down, given the increases in some of these other areas, there isn't necessarily a quote unquote savings that they'll experience to reinvest after they are sort of paying for these maintenance level increases around particularly special education. So wanted to share that with you all this afternoon. Additionally, just sort of wanted to emphasize around taxing on staffing services for school districts. This is the Senate Bill 5814 tax that we were speaking about earlier. We are hearing loud and clear that there are a lot of implementation questions that still remain and a lot of work to be done. There are going to be a number of bills that attempt to address this issue for school districts and other sectors this legislative session. I want to say I've already counted 3 or 4 that have been pre-filed on the legislative list. We are also expecting sort of a clarification bill from requested by the Department of Revenue. And then we're also expecting a bill from Finance Chair April Berg. And I'm sure there are others. There's going to be quite a few bills, is really one I wanted to let you know today. Our legislators are hearing us and are sort of continuing to be reminded about the conversations last year that many advocates had, not myself, because I was not in this role, but that advocates had with legislators around really making sure that school districts were not included. And that is what everyone was told last session. And legislators are acknowledging that they did not intend to burden K-12 with this tax. So we will sort of see what happens in that regard. But I think the fact that there are so many different proposals coming out is a clear signal to me that our legislators are hearing us and are committed to working to address this issue. One link that I'm going to send you as a part of the follow-up from today's meeting is a link to the work session that I mentioned earlier in the House Finance Committee a couple of weeks ago. They essentially had a stakeholder panel just speaking to the impacts of the taxes included in 5814. Superintendent Ron Banner of Clover Park was sort of the K-12 speaker in that panel, and his remarks were just really solid in terms of communicating the need, the burden, and then also the why. And he also, I'm not going to quote the numbers because I didn't write them down ahead of this meeting, but he did essentially speak to, hey, legislature, you increased special education funding last year. We got this amount, great. And we also are now having to expend this other amount as it relates to taxes around 5814. And so just did a really great job at sort of sharing the balance that school districts are facing right now. Would encourage you all to take a look at that panel link. I'll include that recording when we follow up from this meeting. One more piece of session context that I would share is that pre-filed bills are now a thing. Legislators had the ability to start pre-filing legislation on December 1st. There are many more than just the list that's on here. I just tried to pull out a couple that we've already talked about in this group, plus a couple of others that we know are coming, and a couple of others that we know are sort of returning or continuing from 2025. So just running through this list really quickly, returning from last year, we do know very early in the session that the first three bills on that list, isolation and restraint, mental and behavioral health, and the agency separation bill, that sort of separates OSPI and the many sort of smaller agencies that are sort of legally under OSPI right now. We have heard that all three of those bills will receive work sessions and or public hearings within the early parts of the legislative session. So just sort of flagging that for you. Additionally, some bills that we've already seen filed on topics that we've talked about in this group. We did see the MSOC bill come out. That's House Bill 2147 for the upcoming session. Representative Gregerson, the education budget lead vice chair of appropriations, is the lead sponsor on that bill, seconded by Representative Santos. We have also seen one of the bills around school director compensation and required training drop. That's Senate Bill 5860. That's a Senator Cortez bill. As far as I know, Representative Callen is also planning to introduce that bill in the House. So stay tuned for that. And then also Representative Berquist dropped his levy equalization LEA bill. That's House Bill 2116. A couple of other bills that I just wanted to make sure were on your radar that we have heard are coming. We just haven't seen them yet. OSPI is drafting a bill that would sort of dictate minimum and maximum fund balances for school districts. We have not seen a draft of that legislation yet at this time, but wanted to let you know we anticipate that being filed. Senator Wellman is also likely to file a salary allocation model bill. What we've heard from her is that her vision on that is much larger than anything that our legislature will be able to take on this session. It is more sort of filed to initiate some conversation amongst advocates and legislators. So just wanted to let you know that that bill has sort of evolved over the course of the summer and fall. And so we'll see what that looks like. And then also the exemption for services tax, the other sort of 5814 related bill from Representative Berg, we are also anticipating to be dropped soon. On that note, given the large number of bills that are sort of coming out on that topic, I'm going to be digging in with some of my advocacy colleagues here at the state level to try to figure out which of those bills might actually sort of have traction. I think it's a good signal when we see a lot of legislators dropping bills on one topic because we know they're hearing us. And I think it'll be important for us to get a sense for which bill or bills will, actually have some political traction, so that we can figure out, right, like where specifically we want to work and what we want to elevate from each of the different bills that are out there. So we'll be doing a deep dive into that over the course of the next week or so. And my goal is to put together a side-by-side document for you that sort of breaks down section by section each of the bills on that topic that we're sort of seeing political traction gain on. So, okay, I did say one more, but I've got really one more session context related item for you, and that is just making sure that this is clear and on your calendar Thursday, January 29th. This is as a part of our partnership with WASA and WASBO, the date for our Education Advocacy Day. We will be together in Olympia, and districts that want to join us should absolutely feel free to do so. During this day, we will not be scheduling meetings with individual legislators. We're sort of going to leave that task to school districts that join. But what we are going to be putting together that day is we have sort of a welcome kickoff event that we'll be doing on the Capitol steps, where Marissa Rathbone of WASA and myself will speak. And we're also hoping to tap some lawmakers, particularly thinking about some of the sponsors of some of our bills that will be collectively watching to come join us and speak at the Capitol steps that morning. That'll be happening right around the 8:30 mark. So as you're thinking about when you might want to arrive, if that's something you want to join in on, please do. That morning, multiple education committees will have their sort of regularly scheduled public hearings. So during the morning on the 29th, the House Education Committee will meet, as well as the Senate Early Learning and K through 12 Education Committee. Given where we'll be in terms of the legislative session, it is possible that they won't necessarily be hearing bills during that time, and that may be sort of a day for executive action for those committees. So there may not necessarily be the opportunity to provide public testimony, but still a good opportunity to sort of get in the committee rooms and be a part of some of the executive action that we would anticipate they would be doing during that day. Um, Also, during that day, we are going to be working on gatherings of sort of House education and budget leaders, as well as sort of the same concept in the Senate, pulling together members from education committees and budget committees alike to share some big picture updates, take questions from folks that are with us. And then also the budget committees will be meeting later that day during the 4 to 6 o'clock window. We don't necessarily know what they'll be talking about on that day yet. We will find out the week prior. But wanted to let you know that there generally will be a full day of opportunities for you, both sort of scheduled and hosted by WASDA and WASA, and then also legislator meetings that you all might choose to take on and schedule on behalf of your own districts. We will have sort of a home base room that we have reserved on campus that day. So if you're finding and sort of planning for that day and you've got some downtime, or maybe you want to find a space to take your lunch that's inside and you don't want to go to a restaurant, we will have a home base room in the insurance building that day. More details will come out on that soon, but mainly wanted to make sure you got that date, January 29th, on your calendar, should you be able to join us. Okay. Just a couple of WASDA resources before we move into some group discussion. I just wanted to put this in front of you. I don't think we've visited this sort of values list in a while as this group. And so as an advocacy team, Cynthia and I and our contractors that represent us are absolutely invested in making sure that the advocacy work that we do is member driven, student centered, nonpartisan, inclusive, engaging, responsive, and credible. This is a values list that we established and sort of continue to operate and live by every day that we do this work. But as we're sort of preparing for the legislative session, just sort of wanted to put this in front of you and remind you of the values that Cynthia and I and all of us doing advocacy work here at WSSDA are sort of carrying with us. Additionally, some resources that I wanted to put in front of you. Many of you have heard me talk about this for a while, but we will continue the in-session live weekly webinar during the legislative session. We are working on our sign-up link for that, so you'll get that pretty soon. The new update for you this year is that we'll be holding in-session live on Fridays at noon. Previously, we've been holding those on Thursdays at noon. We will just sort of know more and have a better sort of understanding of what's coming on Fridays than we will on Thursdays. So we'll be hosting those every Friday during the session at noon. Additionally, in session, the written publication will continue. Those publications will come to your email boxes on Friday afternoons. If any of you have not signed up for that yet, this is what the sign up page looks like. And I am dropping that link to you in the chat right now. Would encourage you to sign up for in session. And then I'm going to stop sharing my PowerPoint for just a second, and I'm going to pull up the WSSDA website because another resource that I think will be important for you all to see and know about is our WSSDA Bill Watch. You have seen a number of iterations of this over the years, and what we have in front of us this year is something that I think we've heard a number of requests on for the last couple of years. So let me pull that up. Okay, can you see my web page? Okay, Lindsay, I see your face. Can I get a thumbs up from you that it's on? Okay, great. All right, so when you go to our website, all things related to advocacy will be listed under the advocacy tab. For now, I'm just going to go to the bottom and click advocacy. And what I'm going to do is pop to legislative updates, and I'm going to scroll down to the Bill Watch. The Bill Watch page for 2026 will be more interactive than it has been for the last year. And essentially what this will allow you to do is see all the bills that we're tracking first and foremost. The bills on this list right now are real bills that are live and filed for the 2026 legislative session. This list is continuing to grow every single day. We are continuing to populate this list based on the pre-file list on the legislative website. And what you should know about this is that you can sort of use all of these top columns to filter our bill watch. So for example, we don't have any of our positions in here yet, but if you wanted to see which bills WSSDA is pro on, you could click this, and if there was anything in here, it would sort of sort and you'd be able to see all of that. We have categories that we'll be using to sort all of the different bills that we're watching this year. So you can go to this drop-down list, and there is more than this. These are just the only ones that have been tapped so far. But if you wanted to see all the bills that we're watching on learning, instruction, and curriculum, for example, you could click that and you'd be able to see. And if you want to click off, you can just go back into that category box, click on all categories, and it brings everything back. So just wanted to let you know that this resource is out here. We are continuing to expand the number of bills on the list, and would encourage you all to follow that list over the course of session. I had just dropped the Bill Watch link into the chat. The easiest thing for you to do, if you can do that right now, is just to sort of click that link, add it to your favorites bar, and hopefully that means that you will have easy access to the education bills over the course of session. One more resource that I want to show you, this is not a WSSDA resource, but one that I think could be beneficial. This is a data dashboard resource that comes from our colleagues at the Association of Educational Service Districts that essentially pulls together statewide, county, and school district data around MSOC, special education, and transportation. Let's just click into one. For example, we can click in here to MSOC. And I see Lindsay. Sorry that you're the only one that I see right now, Lindsay, but I'm going to scroll to Lake Washington just to give us an example. And this will essentially show us costs versus revenue around MSOC. You can see this also for special education, transportation, substitutes. There's a ton of information that's in here. So just sort of wanted to share this with you so that you know it is out there and available. I just dropped the link, or I'm dropping the link for that in the chat right now for any of you that might want to sort of go through in a deeper dive, and or might want to share this link with any of your district staff. Please feel free to do that. The one sort of caveat that our colleagues are sharing is that this is currently based off of 24-25 school year budgeted data. OSPI, I think in the last couple of days, has published actual data for 2024-25. And so this data dashboard will be updated over the course of the coming weeks. But we hope this will be a good tool for you to use. We are definitely thinking this will be a good tool to use to help our advocacy with legislators, and particularly those who really want to see the numbers behind some of what we're talking about. So wanted to put that in front of you. Okay. We are about to pop into discussion rooms for a bit. We're right on time, which is great. I threw out a couple different questions for you on a couple of different topics, just because that's what I was feeling like today. So feel free to sort of take what you like. If you have time, would love for you to go through all of them. If you don't, maybe your group just wants to sort of pick one or two. I will let you sort of pick on there. But what I want to propose that you all sort of chat about today is just in general, what lessons from last session you think should inform our approach to advocacy this year. Many of you on this call are advocacy veterans. You've been doing this for a while. And so I imagine there are some lessons learned that we all sort of have. I would love to hear from you if there's any in particular that stand out that you'd like to make sure we're continuing to elevate and focus this year. Would love to encourage you to think about what you as ledge reps or legislatively active school board members can do to sort of best translate district realities to lawmakers. So thinking about, what sort of tools and resources would be helpful for you, maybe like that data dashboard that we just looked at, and then sort of how WSSDA can support you all to best do that work. And then this is just a fun prompt that I would love actually to hear from you on. If you had 30 seconds with a legislator, what's the one message you'd like for them to remember? I would love if you could think about that in the context of sort of the WSSDA priorities that we've been talking about in this group. And then just more of a general question. What else do you feel like you need from WSSDA in order to be fully prepared and fully active during the 2026 legislative session? I am stopping screen share and I'm going to drop those questions in the chat because if I remember right, those follow you. Those are there. And then any questions about any of that before we move into breakout rooms? We'll put you in there for, it's 12:35. We'll go for about 12 minutes. Okay, good at this. Okay, welcome back from your breakout groups. I'll just go through each of you. We have just under 10 minutes And there are 5 groups. So if you could think about maybe 90 seconds or so to share an update, that'd be lovely. You can talk about whatever things you'd like that sort of resonate for you from your discussion. I'm going to go to group 1 first. You don't know who that is, but I do. That's Christina and Lori. If one of you might be willing to share some of what you talked about.
I will let Lori.
I had to get all my things clicked here, the video and the audio. It was just really a great opportunity to hear what's going on in Christina's Mercer Island School District. So we shared a lot about that, some things that we're definitely thankful for that we have going for us in our school districts, our parent groups, things like that that really help make the school district strong, I think. We're both concerned about, making the budget work and kind of what's happening with the student population who's going away from public school. Um, so we talked a little bit about that and oh, what else am I missing? The weather and how these schools that are getting flooded are now going to be in a situation where they're going to need more money to build back up and get their schools in good shape. So that's a concern. And we both use the Bill Watch and the legislative updates throughout the year to follow bills, see where they're going. And I use it especially to comment, to get me to the right page where I can comment quickly with an up, down, thumbs up, thumbs down, and then just a quick, 2 sentence how this would or would not affect my district. That's a really great tool, and I'm grateful to have that.
Great. I'm so glad it's helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Lori and Christina. Appreciate those highlights. Let's go to group 2 that had David and Karen.
Hello. So one of the things that we liked was the new look of the bill tracking page. So I'm excited to see how that works out for us. We talked about the importance of both the story that our students can tell to legislators, that we can tell to legislators, and then to have our superintendents follow up with some of the bigger picture numbers on things. That we can give the legislators maybe that personal anecdote that'll stick with them, and then have our superintendents follow up with the bigger numbers that might matter to them. Really, again, talking about funding. Funding can't guarantee things, but the lack of funding absolutely hurts us. So to be able to explain again that the MSOC costs really do matter, and without fully funding them, then that hurts us in so many other areas because we're having to rob from other programs to keep the lights on. And those things just don't work.
And
Um,
one more thing, we talked about pushing for, I would like to see at least a half a day session at WSSDA dedicated to funding, especially with, people don't so understand, right? Lottery money. Well, I thought lottery was funding education. So if we don't understand, people, general public, some of our legislators don't understand, and majority school board directors don't even understand funding.
yeah, the funding process for our schools certainly is complex, and for those of us who have legislators who aren't on educational committees and tend to respond to us with, if it comes up for a vote, then I'll start to pay attention to it kinds of answers. That really isn't a satisfactory answer to hear. A lot of them still are on financial committees, and they ought to be concerned about these things earlier, and to make sure that we keep on them about that. It's going to benefit us in the long term.
Great. Thank you both. I also just added into my notes to, at minimum, incorporate some conversation around funding into the Strategic Advocacy Academy. that I'll be hosting at the next annual conference. It'll be one of our pre-conference options. So I'll make a note at minimum to throw some stuff in there and bring that back to our planning committee. Thank you both. Okay, let's move to the next room that had Liza, TJ, and Larry.
Okay, one of the things we talked about was if you had 30 seconds to talk to the legislator, what would you tell them? I just said fully fund education. You know, do that, and then that takes care of a lot of the problems that we have. You know, they just need to fully fund it. And then I also touched on impact aid for us, for our school districts like ours on reservations, where we haven't seen an increase in funding there, and basically over the last 3 years, and the whole program's not been fully funded since '69. So, you know, we're taking a loss and from both sides, but the federal side and the state side. So, yeah, it's just I'm between the rock and the hard spot. What do I do?
Thank you, Larry and group. Really appreciate the simple talking point for legislators. Okay, let's go to room 4. Marisa and Sarah.
Okay, Sarah and I had a really good conversation. Starting off, we talked about lessons from the session to inform our approach. We said that, you know, all the education organizations coalescing on the big 3 was a real positive. Kind of a negative was the whole Senate Bill 5814, how legislators had great intentions, but due to a lack of really good analysis, the whole thing kind of fell apart and just did not work for us. Sarah, do you want to go on and talk about how can ledge reps translate district realities?
Sure.
Okay.
We were talking a bit about how we can communicate the choices we have to make when there's the ongoing increasing costs that are out of our control, and what are the kind of reductions that we have to make locally when that happens. So like for Shoreline, the staffing reductions we've had to make over the past couple of years have been almost entirely our support layer in our buildings, and really highlighting like that is honestly also the equity layer in our buildings that is providing the supports needed, and really helping them understand that the mandated model is really, you know, just like the baseline, and that's not truly meeting student needs, and helping them understand those choices with dollars has been really effective, especially when we're talking about things like utilities and insurance, and helping them understand how does that end up. And then Marisa had a great point about curriculum, so I'm going to throw it back to you.
Okay. We talked about messages to give our legislators are sometimes, you know, if they're asking, hey, why are your assessments so low? You know, your student assessments, why should we put more money into education? And it's because sometimes our curricula are so outdated. You know, we can't afford, or we make decisions, you know, to put in student supports, maybe instead of updating, you know, science curricula that's 8 years old, or you know, other CTE curricula that has been even older that I've seen, like up to 20 years old for marketing, you know, curriculum, which is just crazy in my mind. But you know, things like that, and that is a reason our students are doing the best they can. But you know, it's not, you know, they can't compete if they're using really old, you know, curricula, and other students, you know, have more updated stuff and are testing to you know, to things, you know, the students with newer curricula obviously have an advantage to students, you know, despite good teachers doing the best they can. You know, if our curricula is too old, we just can't make the strides that are for our students that they deserve.
Thank you both very much. Very powerful. Okay, we are at 1 o'clock, but I want to give the last group, that's River, Lindsay, and David. If you could maybe just share in like 1 or 2 sentences, any highlights. Sorry that we're out of time.
Wow, what's equitable in that?
I know,
Hey,
sorry.
we concur with Marissa that lessons learned was, it was nice to have WASA, WASBO, and WASDAL at the same one, but Senator Wellman and Representative Santos both said, we hear you, and then they went back and did nothing for the most part. So our school districts are still supremely underfunded. 30 seconds. Our 30-second comment was no unfunded mandates, which also lends to what Marissa said. Years ago, we said no unfunded mandates, but that could also be no unintended consequences, like what happened with this new tax. So that's about that. And then also how to translate our situations is have positive working relationships with your local legislators, and then know who's on the various committees. So like who's on the state House Education Committee, who's on the Senate Education Committee, and try and get introductions to them. Like my state senator locally is on the Education Committee, and Lindsay's is also on the Education Committee. So that's helpful to know who your folks are so that you can have a positive relationship and tell them what your district is most in need of. So that's it.
That's lovely. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. That was perfect. Okay, we are over time, but I have one graphic that I want to show you. We talked for the last couple of meetings about rebranding this space. And so you see a beautiful new graphic on the screen. Shout out Robbie, because I think you're here still. We will be moving forward with continuing these meetings, of course, into 2026 under a new name and a new brand. We will be calling this the Advocacy Action Network moving forward. Really just trying to emphasize that this group is open for any advocacy interested school director, not just legislative representatives. So really excited about our rebrand. We'll talk more about that in the new year. But what I want you to know for now is just thank you. My contact information as well as Cynthia's is on the screen for you in case you don't have it. The first meeting of the Advocacy Action Network is not on your calendars yet, but we'll be holding that on Tuesday, January 20th at noon. I will populate your calendars with all occurrences for 2026 of that group. We also will have a sign-up form similar to the way that you sign up for in-session, for example. If there are other directors that you know that you don't see here, that you think might like to be invited to the space, please share the sign-up form with them. Like I said, any district director is absolutely able to join this space. As long as y'all are following OPMA rules and not bringing a quorum of your board in here, for example. But other than that, we will take anyone who's interested. Thank you so much for joining today, and hope you have happy holidays, and we'll see you all in the new year. Take care, everyone.